what are the kind of things that you have to take into consideration in terms of what is reasonable to charge a tenant?
If you're walking through the property and you see scuff marks on the walls where people have brushed against it, that's for me is fair wear and tear. If you see a gouge mark in the plaster, then that isn't.
Landlords haven't been able to give notice because the tenant's deposit has been registered before the deposit has actually been received. Welcome to the All Things Property podcast with me, Simon Bacon of Preferential Properties. Every week, Ian Sadler and I will delve into all things property. We'll guide you through with friendly, no-nonsense advice. Hello, Ian.
Morning, Simon.
Here we are again with another episode of All Things Property. And today we're going to be talking deposits. Not bank deposits, security deposits, which I have to be honest say is one of the most common sources of disputes when a tenancy comes to its end. So what I'd like to do today is to try and break down how deposits should work, what fair wear and tear actually means, and why a good inventory protects both sides. So Ian, why do deposits exist for tenants?
They exist as a safeguard against potential damage caused by a tenant during their tenancy of the property.
Okay. Now there are some myths associated with security deposits. Let's try and debunk them, shall we?
Okay.
So a deposit is the tenant's money at all times.
Yes.
It's held on account in a government-approved scheme.
Yes.
And it has to be registered.
Within 28 days of receipt.
That's right, yeah. Now, you can't register the deposit until you've actually received the deposit.
No.
There have been some cases in law recently where landlords haven't been able to give notice because the tenant's deposit has been registered before the deposit has actually been received. So that's a, important factor for landlords and letting agents to bear in mind, that you can't register a deposit until you have physically received it, and then you have a very specific timescale within which to register it in one of the government schemes. We should remind everybody that the tenant's deposit is paid by the tenant and remains the tenant's monies in law, and landlords can use it for what in
Dilapidations during the tenancy.
and they have to be agreed?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we safeguard that? How do we make sure that deposits are dealt with in the best possible way at the end of a tenancy?
And it's worth mentioning that the agent or the landlord cannot deduct monies from the deposit without both parties agreeing. And that used to be allowed. How many years ago did they change that? About 5-10 years maybe?
Yeah. It's very clear that the tenancy agreement will state what the deposit can be used for. It can be used for unpaid rent. But I think one of the common myths is that the landlord can access and use the deposit if the tenant hasn't paid their rent during the tenancy. But the deposit can't be touched until the tenancy has actually finished, and then only in agreement with the tenant. And I think that's something that,
Which protects the tenant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the tenant's money at the end of the day, and it's not there to be used for any purposes other than at the end of the tenancy process when the tenant has moved out. So that leads us on, I guess, quite nicely to how does the deposit, how does the tenant's deposit safeguard it? And I would say the most important aspect when a tenant moves in is to make sure that there is a good quality inventory in place.
Yeah, photographic evidence is crucial.
Yeah, things have really changed, haven't they?
Yeah.
I had an example the other week from a first-time landlord, house worth over £500,000, monthly rent in excess of £2,000 a month, and I said to him, "Do you want us to do an inventory?" And he said to me, "What do I need an inventory for?" "What are you going to do? Count the number of walls and windows?" How would you have responded to that?
The blissful naivety. I would have explained to him succinctly that the possible problems that could cause by not having the contentious issues that may arise with that one.
Yeah. In the end, he agreed we could do an inventory, and it was really interesting for me to notice the change. So I sent him a copy of the inventory when it had been done, and he phoned me up and said, "Oh, I can see why you wanted me to have an inventory done."
Penny dropped.
Yeah, absolutely. An inventory that, an inventory is what?
A schedule of contents and condition of a property at the start of a tenancy.
Yeah, and the photos support that.
Absolutely.
To show, not only what it is in writing, but also, date-stamped photos also support that. And I guess, that's something that, again, bit of a misconception, that the inventory actually is one of the fundamental documents to go with a tenancy, isn't it?
Prerequisite.
Yeah. And so what do you do in terms of a tenancy? You've got photos, you've got condition notes, meter readings.
Yeah, meter readings, photographs of meter readings, added to the inventory.
Photographs of keys.
Yeah.
And so you produce that a few days before the tenant moves in, you provide it to the tenant. What's then the requirement for the tenant in terms of that inventory? Do they just go, "Thanks very much," or what's the purpose of the inventory then for the tenant?
For them to compare the condition of the property at the end of the tenancy when they're happy to hand the keys back to the start of the tenancy.
Do you give any advice and recommendations to the tenant when you give them the inventory at the beginning, or not?
Well, I ask them to sign it and send it back, check it, go through it and sign it and send it back, but it very often is the case that it's not returned.
And yet, from a tenant's perspective, if there's a lesson to learn from a tenant's perspective, I would say go through the inventory when you move in, check it, make sure it is an accurate reflection, and if you disagree with any aspect of it, I would encourage you to perhaps take some photos and also make some notes so that when you return your inventory to the agent or the landlord, not only are you sending them back their original inventory, but it's annotated with any notes and photographs that you might have. Makes the move out process much less contentious, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so once that's happened, let's talk about fair wear and tear. Now, this really is very subjective, but also incredibly contentious. So what is wear and tear? What's your definition of wear and tear? Let's see if we agree.
Well, it's not damage as such, but for want of a better word, it's a condition of the property that's worsened by a tenant living in it.
Natural aging of property over time?
Yeah, wear and tear in high traffic areas like entrance halls, bathrooms maybe, kitchens, where walls will become scuffed. You can't expect them to be the same pristine condition.
Okay, so let me give you some examples and you tell me, in your opinion, whether this would be damage or fair wear and tear. Faded carpets.
Fair wear and tear.
Red wine stains to a carpet.
Damage. How am I doing?
Yep, I think you're doing quite well. Another one for you. You'll never experience this yourself. Hot straightening brushes on a carpet.
Yeah, contentious because I had a situation once where a landlord said, "I want that carpet replaced for the sake of a 12-inch burn." I spoke to...
Is a burn mark fair wear and tear or damage?
No, it's damage.
Okay.
But
let's keep on the damage of fair wear and tear, then come back to it. All right.
And coming back to that one.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one. Loose door handle.
Fair wear and tear.
Okay. A broken internal door.
Damage.
Excellent. Okay. So that's just a few examples. Let's go back then to the straightener marks, the burn marked carpet.
I spoke to a solicitor friend of mine and put the scenario to them about this, and they said it's unreasonable and wouldn't be acceptable to charge the tenant for replacing the whole carpet. If you wanted to replace the carpet, you could charge a small sum for the damage, and that's if the carpet was £300 to replace, you can maybe charge £50 to the tenant for that damage.
Okay. We'll talk again about it, I'm sure, in a while. But when looking at fair wear and tear, what are the kind of factors that have to be considered? Length of tenancy?
Yeah, age of the tenancy, length of tenancy.
Number of occupants?
Yeah. Pets.
Yeah. Quality of the items?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's furnished, is it? Oh, no, the appliances, yeah.
Appliances or, quality of the carpet. You can have a cheap carpet, you can have an expensive carpet. So a cheap carpet will naturally wear much quicker than a more expensive carpet. Mm-hmm. A commercial carpet will wear much less than, a non-bleachable carpet, for example, in terms of cleaning. So there are all the sorts of things that you need to consider when looking at fair wear and tear. So what's the issue then in terms of, you hinted at it, a burn mark on a carpet? When you're looking at that burn mark, so let's say, and I don't know why, but, the number of properties I've been into where there is the outline of an iron on a carpet.
I have one of those at home.
Do you?
I do.
Iron or a carpet?
I'm not charging myself for it, but
really?
Wasn't me though.
Okay. So what are the kind of things that you have to take into consideration in terms of what is reasonable to charge a tenant? And I think, for me, again, this is an area where landlords and tenants often are poles apart. So what's your understanding? You mentioned you've spoken to a solicitor. So a burn mark on a carpet.
It's clear damage to the property, and it's...
and that can't be disputed, can it?
No, it lessens the quality and appearance of the place. Mm-hmm. So I feel it's fair to assess a payment for that, but not replacing the whole carpet. You have to be fair, basically.
And what would the rules be? So you're fair. Is there any guidelines on what's fair and reasonable? Or
I wouldn't say there's no formula for a hair straightener's burn on a carpet. It's a lot of it is instinct and experience and fairness.
But if you can't agree on it, often it ends up going to the arbitration service of the deposit scheme for dispute resolution. Now, obviously the aim is never to get to there, but if it did, do you know what the guidelines are from the arbitration service?
You're going to enlighten me.
Do you know?
I will do in a minute.
Okay. I mean, the issue is that there are a number of factors that they will take into consideration. The size of the burn, the age of the carpet, and the quality of the carpet. So you're right, you can't, if you put an iron mark, and an iron mark is often better than a straightener in terms of it's very visible, there's no dispute, you have an imprint of an iron in the carpet, there's no dispute that it's caused by putting an iron on the carpet when it was hot. Now, from a landlord's perspective, a lot of landlords would say, well, that's damage and therefore I need to be able to replace the carpet for the new tenant coming in. Now, the TDS or the arbitration service won't allow you to replace the carpet in its entirety. All you can get as a maximum is an allowance towards that. Now, the basis of that allowance is how long if it's a new carpet, then the allowance you can expect will be more than if it is a carpet that has been down for 2 to 3 years. If the carpet hasn't been replaced in 5 years, then it's likely that the allowance you will get will be a negligible allowance. and then they look at, well, where was the carpet? Is the carpet or the flooring in a high traffic area? If it's in a high traffic area, the allowance will be less than if it's in a low traffic area, such as a bedroom, low traffic, lounge, hallway, high traffic. So there are so many variables that do make it very subjective. And I think that, for me, is the issue where often as a letting agent, as the middle person, we're very much having to manage the landlord's expectations, but also manage the tenant's expectation, because lots of tenants will say, oh, straighteners on a carpet, that's fair wear and tear. What do you expect me to do?
Not drop them.
Absolutely. Or have a heating mat that you put the straighteners on, or not put your iron.
You know a lot about hair straighteners, don't you?
I do, for someone with a lack of hair, only because it comes up quite often.
Oh, okay.
You'll also, another issue is makeup on carpet. I have no experience of makeup, but I still know quite a bit about it. So, the orange stains that you often get from makeup, very, very easy to happen, but there has to be an element of, above fair wear and tear for things like makeup. Makeup to be considered damage, not fair.
It's a fairly common source of damage, isn't it?
Mm.
So it's part of life in a tenancy almost.
Yeah.
So that is why an element of it has to be considered as damage, and some of it's fair wear and tear as a normal occurrence.
Yeah. So carpets, I think, carpets and flooring is a severely contentious issue. I also think decoration is another contentious issue. I think you mentioned about walls in hallways being treated very differently to walls in bedrooms. Ooh, what's the rationale behind that then?
Well, they're high traffic areas, but if you're walking through the property and you see scuff marks on the walls where people have brushed against it, that's for me is fair wear and tear. If you see a gouge mark in the plaster, then that's maybe happened moving in or moving out, and that's
Damage.
Damage, yeah.
Oh, okay. And in terms of allowances, what kind of things can, what kind of allowances can a tenant expect to have deducted, or a landlord expect to be awarded in terms of decor then? Well, what do you take them up?
On the carpet principle, for a small amount of damage, you can't expect to paint a whole wall just because of a small indentation. Even if you can't find the paint, correct colour paint, it's almost take it on the chin really, and just do the best you can with it.
I think the arbitration service, the recommendation they tend to give is that you need to consider when the wall in question was last decorated. Is it again a high traffic area? How many occupants were there in the property? For example, a flat where there are no children, the life expectancy of the decor would be greater than a house that has 2 adults and 2 children in it. So I think certainly my perspective when looking at deductions and the condition of the property from the move in to the move out, you have got to be very aware and reflective of how many tenants have been in the property, when the property was last redecorated, were there children in the property, all those sorts of things. And it is very subjective. And I think the subjective nature of it is what causes some of the conflict.
And difference of personalities of landlords, agents and tenants as well.
Yeah.
And the whole lot is an ingredient for confrontation.
Absolutely. I think the upshot really from this for me is reasonableness. If I do a move out, I think you can walk into a property, and I don't know how other agents do it, I don't know how landlords do it, but the way that I tend to do it is I will walk into a property and I will walk round to get a feel for what the condition of the property is like, having reviewed the condition of the property through the inventory, before the tenant moves in, because if you walk through a property, you get a very clear indicator, without going into real detail at that point, of, you know, has the tenant made best endeavours? And if the tenant has made, in my opinion, best endeavours, then, you know, that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
And then the detail is going through in, you know, fine detail, then the cleanliness and, you know, to identify any damage. I was at funny enough, I was at a move out 2 days ago where it's incredibly easy to miss things. So I was checking the keys into a patio, French doors leading out into a garden, and the keys all looked fine, property was in reasonable condition, being cleaned, windows being cleaned, etc. And then I was putting a key in to check the keys that I had, and I noticed 2 really small chip marks on the external glazing, where obviously, as a tenant has been mowing the lawn, a stone has come up and chipped the double glazed unit.
So what did you do about that?
Again, is that damage or is that not damage?
It's life, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, but is it damage?
I guess in true definition of damage, yes, it is.
Okay, so the definition is that's been damaged. Is that fair wear and tear, though? Is that reasonable damage, or is that malicious damage?
Reasonable damage.
Okay, so therefore, is it reasonable to make a deduction from the tenant's deposit for that or not?
I wouldn't.
Okay. Is it your decision, or is that the landlord? Would you put that to the landlord to make a decision? And what guidance would you give them?
I need to discuss it with the landlord, I guess, and the guidance I'd give them is just what I just mentioned, that in my opinion it can happen. It was malicious damage, it's like accidental wear and tear, or accidental damage, if you like. So
I think ultimately there's no right or wrong answer to that.
It's so contentious, the whole thing, isn't it?
And it is very subjective, because you're right, you know, if you're cutting your lawn and a stone flicks up and causes a very small pinhole, you may not even notice it, but it's been noticed, so it is damage. But potentially the tenant hasn't gone out of their way to cause that damage. So on that bombshell, I suppose, maybe what we should do is just sum it up and say, deposits, if you handle deposits professionally, then I think 90% of any arguments will disappear. Ultimately, there has to be a balance and there has to be a reasonableness to your approach. And I think good communication, again, has been the theme of many of our podcasts, but good communication with the tenant and the landlord can ease some of the contentious issues that do arise when dealing with the tenant's deposits. So finally, thanks for listening, and we look forward to your audience at the next podcast. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
And if you would like to talk to us about your property needs, or want a valuation, or want to talk about renting your property out, please give us a call. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the All Things Property podcast. If you found this episode useful, don't forget to subscribe, like and share. These things really help us reach the people who need to hear this advice. See you next week.